This episode is brought to you by Groove Washer, the best record cleaners and protective sleeves for your vinyl collection. Ask for the Groove Washer from your local shop or go to groovewasher.com. Discount code VinylGuide10. And now, on with the show.
Oh my goodness, we're so close to episode 400, but we're not there yet. Hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 398 of the Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And today we have Ray and Blackie from one of Australia's most beloved bands, the Hard-Ons, who are celebrating their new LP, Ripper 23. It's out now on streaming and vinyl. And depending on where you are in the world, you can go to cheersquadrecordstapes.bandcamp.com. Of course, you can follow the Hard-Ons at facebook.com/Hard-Ons. And by the way, there is a super special limited vinyl pressing that's available that Ray will share later in the interview, give you directions on how to get that. Now today, Ray, Blackie, and I discuss the new album. We talk about Ray's massive record collection, the music that made each of them want to join a band, the history of the Hard-Ons and the Sydney music and record scene, making the first EP, the benefits and challenges of having such a provocative band name, the status of the Hard-Ons music catalog, and heaps more. Oh, and by the way, there is an extended version of this interview available only to show patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. Supporters of the show get an extra 15 minutes or so of wisdom, music history, and stories from Ray and Blackie. And again, that's only for show supporters at patreon.com/vinylguide. So head up there now and help support our dopey podcast. And one final note, if you don't already follow the Vinyl Guide podcast in your podcast app, please do so now. It's totally free, and you get full access to literally hundreds of episodes and interviews with the likes of Ed Cooper of The Saints, Laughing Clowns, and more, episode 396 of the Vinyl Guide, Jay Mascis of Dinosaur Jr., Heavy Blanket, Witch, and more, episode 393, Tim Herb Alexander of Primus, episode 388, Ross Knight, the Legend of the Bloody Cosmic Psychos, episode 385, Jerry A. Lang of Poison Idea, episode 372, East Bay Ray of Dead Kennedys, episode 355, Ambrose Kenny Smith of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, episode 325, Dave Tice of the mighty Australia rock band Buffalo, episodes 318 and 319, Amel and the Sniffers, all four of them, episode 301, Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top, episode 293, and literally hundreds more. Follow the Vinyl Guide in your favorite podcast app and enjoy them all. Alrighty, with the upfronts done, let's get into our conversation with Ray On and Peter Black about the history and recordings of the Hard-Ons.
Hello.
Hey there, stranger.
Mike, how about now?
There we go.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
That's all right. How you doing, Ray?
Oh, I can't complain. Is that your records up the back? That's fantastic.
That's some of them.
Oh, jeez.
This is the downstairs.
These are my 7-inches. Hang on a second. You see the LPs?
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so my wife's brother-in-law made these shelves. So I sit there and listen to these records. They go. See how it's like from floor to ceiling?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he did a really good job. And then you walk to the other side and it continues on the other side there.
I love the fact that there's no direct light in from the windows. That's one thing I'm battling upstairs.
Oh, there's no light. There's the light hits the back of your head when you sit there and the light goes onto the record player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I've run out of room. That's I can't put any more records there. So I think I'm gonna have to I'm gonna, if I want any more records, then I'm gonna have to clear these IKEA expedites out, and throw some books away. So I've thrown away a lot of books not long recently to try and make more room.
So getting rid of some of your records is not an option, is what you're saying. You just got to figure out how to make more room.
I used to be able to do it, Nate. It's really weird. When I was young, I had no qualms about getting records and selling them on to my friends, thinking I'll just get something else. But now I think it's because in the last 20 years, this kind of fatalistic thing has come over everybody with records. It's like we all know that the world is going to electric cars, and people are no longer looking at, like the world as an endless bounty of things. So we all know that it's a finite resource, isn't it? Records. I mean, when we were young, we didn't think that, records would stop production or anything like that. But now I look at them and I go, wow, some people look at records and go, wow, that's a real waste of human resources. And, the carbon footprint on making records is huge and that kind of stuff. And I think, well, maybe they're right, And so if I have 3 copies of a certain record, I just go, well, they're so precious, I don't want to give any of them up, really, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. Look, my collection's always expanding and contracting. Like I'll be at the record fairs. It's catch and release,
Right.
And then sometimes if I see some records, like I can't pass up a copy of, for example, Miles Davis Tribute to Jack Johnson. If I see it and it's in that, $10 to $20 window or less, I'm taking it home. And I'll end up kind of distributing it or selling it or giving it to a friend or something like that. But, there are certain records that, look, it's a compulsion, really.
Well, Jack Johnson is arguably a better record than Kind of Blue or Sketches of Spain, really, isn't it? Like in terms of being creative and how beautiful it is.
Certainly, to me, I think that was a great entry point to Miles Davis. Like I tried to go from, a life of listening to rock and that, punk and whatever, to go to Kind of Blue directly is pretty difficult. Even Sketches of Spain, a lot of his older stuff. But Tribute to Jack Johnson, to me, was the perfect entry point to be able to start to kind of, get some perspective on jazz. And then I eventually made my way to those and, and beyond. But I think it's when you're ready, like Zappa, you can't just jump into jazz from hell. You have to kind of come a different way and make your way there.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. I really like that Miles Davis record called Bitches Brew. I don't even think that it sounds like a typical jazz record. There's so much of it. It just sounds like a rock record if they were doing some voodoo over it or something, Yeah, it's amazing.
Actually, Blackie recommended that I get Big Fun. I hadn't spent any time with that, and then I picked up a copy of that. So that was actually a recent acquisition. Is he joining tonight, by the way?
Well, he's supposed to. Do you want me to give him a call and come jump back in?
Oh, I could probably text him.
Yeah, could you? Yeah. Yeah, I do have Big Fun as well, but only on CD. At one stage, I read about this record called Big Fun, this legendary record, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Couldn't find vinyl, couldn't find nothing. And one day I found the only way I could get it was a 2 CD set from Japan. So I bought that from a shop I was working at the time. And then after that, I just gave up on finding a record, and then I started working at Utopia Records, and my boss sent me to the States to buy records for his shop in 2004, and I found a whole bunch of them really cheap. And I don't, to this day, I don't know why. I think I was in 2004. I wasn't buying any records at the time at all. I went through this period of my life when I just went, I'm not buying any records. I don't care what it is. And I just didn't. I brought back to Australia so many incredible records, because if you remember 2004, people were still not really valuing records that much at all, and that was only 20 years ago. People just didn't care about them, and my boss sent me to a bunch of warehouses and the Orange County Fair and the Austin Convention, and I just couldn't believe how many great records there were for next to nothing. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, those days are sadly gone.
I know. I know.
So have you always been into vinyl? Like, was there a period where you kind of dropped out, went CDs, sold your collection or anything? Or have you been vinyl pretty much ride or die from day one?
No, I've been vinyl from day one. I started collecting records with my family in 1977. In 1976, I was buying cassettes because that's all my family had, a cassette player. But in 1977, my mum and dad bought those 3-in-1s where there's a cassette deck and a radio and a turntable all in one unit. Yeah. So they bought one of them, and we just went crazy buying records. And I haven't really stopped. But in terms of selling records for CDs, no, I've never done that because I just love art so much. And I just figured it was for me, it was good that I approached art from a perspective of somebody who took a holistic approach. So, for example, the whole idea of Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, being on that 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters square with the stark yellow, and to me that's really important. That's what the band wanted you to see. Yeah, I found the record cover, for example, and the fact that the band wanted first song to be this and the last song on side one to be this. I found all that part of art, part of what it was meant to be. So when somebody asks me why I don't like streaming, and I just have to tell them, look, when you go to the Louvre in Paris, you see Mona Lisa. You can see Mona Lisa from a distance and take that into your brain and your heart, and then eventually to your soul. Or you can just go down to the gift shop and buy the postcard, because essentially it's the same, right? Well, no. I think the streamed product of an album is a postcard compared to the actual painting. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah,
it does.
And the postcard is nothing to be scoffing at, because if you look at a postcard of Mona Lisa and the soul of that painting reaches your soul, then good for you. But it is a postcard, and the streaming is, you do miss out on a lot of elements of the original art. But to be fair, Nate, if a band nowadays goes and records an album directly to digital and then releases a CD and releases an LP, and they give me a choice, you can have the CD for $20 or you can have the LP for $45. What do you want? I'll take the CD. I'll take the CD now.
Okay.
Because I'm not missing out on anything, because the band still wanted me to see the CD. They were actively involved in creating that CD. It's just not the case with, for example, Deep Purple, Machine Head, which has a gatefold in the lyric sheet. The band were not involved in manufacturing of the CD. That came after, So I'm not interested in the CD of it, except to play it in the car.
So when you guys created an album, and Blackie's here. Hey there.
Hey, can you hear me, by the way?
Can hear you fine.
Hello, Blackie. Yep.
Okay. Hey.
So when you guys create a new album, does it feel incomplete if it's not on vinyl?
To me, it does, because I love vinyl. So I'm really glad vinyl's back, because when we put out records, I think, I have to really think as kind of like the one of the guys in the band that has to think about the actual visual graphics of the album cover. I have to think, what's going to look good on 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters, as well as the CD. So you can't make it look great on LP and then make it look rubbish on CD. So I have to really think about it at both things. And I love the 30 by 30 large palette. It gives a lot of scope for a lot of great things. So now I'm glad vinyl's back, to be honest. I don't know how Blackie feels about it, but I would suspect probably the same.
Why don't you ask me?
How do you feel about it, Blackie?
Yeah, look, I actually, like when I'm putting a record together, I still think in terms of albums. I can't help it. It's because I'm from that era. Like, I love what an album does for me. Like for me, CDs are real accessories. And the only thing I really like about CDs is when you can buy something like, say like when I brought the Buzzcocks one with, a bonus disc of, extra tracks and all that sort of thing. I just like it for that sort of thing, the bonus tracks. But for me, a real musical statement is an album. I remember from day one, you buy an album, you take it home, you put it on the turntable, and it begins. So I just feel that way, this will make a killer side 1, this will make a killer side 2. I never think, we got enough for us, enough good songs for a CD. I just don't think that way.
Right.
I like the adventure that an album feels like for me, a good record.
So you guys have been friends since grade school. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's the first music or the first record you guys bonded over?
I can't remember.
I'll tell you what it is. I think there was one band that we both liked, and that was Bay City Rollers. We both liked them, and I really liked ABBA as well, but I don't remember if Blackie liked them. But I remember also liking Bay City Rollers as well. The single that they had at the time was Bye Bye Baby, which was like that Four Seasons cover, and that was massive. I think we both liked them.
Yeah, but maybe right at first. I kind of don't remember that, but I do remember loving the Bay City Rollers. But I know when, a few years later, when I got into punk rock, as we walk into class, Ray said to me, he goes, "Oh, you're that guy that likes the Sex Pistols and the Damned." And I said, "Yeah, are you the guy that likes the Clash and might have been XTC?" So then we started, trading tapes, and because when you discover that punk rock stuff, it's like a whole world opens up. So you get really giddy, and there was a lot of, what else have you heard? What else have you heard? Did you see that last night? On or whatever video show we watched. And
I think because it was an era before the internet, you really had to be proactive in getting to bands that were a little bit more obscure. So, I mean, I heard Susie and the Banshees, for example, on TV, that single Hong Kong Garden, but I think Black was the only person that I knew who had one of their records in the whole school. Bands like Public Image Limited and Japan, I didn't really know that much about them until I went to Blackie's house and I heard a Japan record, I remember. So you kind of had to rely on whatever you can get for information about obscure bands because internet wasn't available. So from necessity, you find out this other person likes the music that you like. They become a resource for you and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And we went to a lot of record shopping together when we were little kids, and we used to tape things for each other, and we used to play records we used to buy to each other over the telephone, putting the telephone receiver next to the speaker and that kind of stuff. And, I do look back on those days really fondly.
Yeah. And it's not just that, like, as Ray said, we were like, because I remember thinking when I first heard the Pistols and had to buy their record, I remember there was always this weirdo record shop in Town Hall Station that I would pass, with my mum, and I was always drawn to it because it's like, what the fuck is this? You could just tell it was something amazing. Like it had fucked up stuff on there, and had like old black and white sort of drawn pornography on the wall, just really bizarre. And records, like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? We all knew AC/DC and stuff, but this was like a whole different world. And like going to all those record shops and going all the time, a few of the guys in the record shops in particular, we became friends with, and we're like, all right, what's next? And then they would start playing us stuff. So, it'd be like a whole day, we'd get on a train, get off at Town Hall Station. We'd normally start with Record Plant first. Hi, Frank, what's good? And he's like, what do you want to hear today? And he would play us pretty much whatever we wanted to hear, whatever we read about in NME or, whatever magazines were around at the time.
Mm-hmm. Was Phantom Records one of your stops? Was that around when you guys were?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the record shop, I think is Blackie the shop that you're talking about at Town Hall Station. You're talking about Anthem Records.
Yes.
Yeah, with a guy with the glasses that used to work there who was semi-grumpy at times.
Oh, he was always grumpy. But it
Yeah,
wasn't
okay.
just, even when it was closed and if I was in a city by myself, even before I brought anything, I used to just like press my head against the window and try to look in there. It was just like a weird little glass cube. And then when I heard Pistols on TV and went, oh, I need this, I knew just instinctively that he would have it, and I went in there and I brought it. And then I think I came in another week or so later and I went, I need more punk. And he's like, well, what do you want then? And I'm like, I don't know, I just want punk. And he goes, and I think the second record he gave me was a Cramps one. So I took that home and went, oh, it's different. It's still fucking awesome. And then, I don't know, maybe the third one might have been Plasmatics. So it was just really diving in. And I think we were lucky because back then there was no bad records. It's almost whatever you picked up was fucking awesome.
Yeah. I mean, Sydney was also a very, band-rich city. You had a lot of great music being generated here. And I imagine a lot of those records were in the shops that you guys took home, yeah?
Man, definitely. And I'll tell you, this is a really bad thing about Australia because even I thought that way. But like one guy in particular that we were very close friends with and still are to this day, a guy named Frank Cottrell who worked at Record Plant. And he used to almost call us his kids. And he's like, here's my kids. What do you guys want to listen to today? I remember one time after, buying punk records for fuck knows how long, maybe even more than a year, and then going, hey, what about Australia? And he sort of went, oh, you finally asked. And then he played me Saints. And that fucked with my head because it was like, here I am buying Clash records and whatnot. And this was underneath my nose the whole time. That record really changed so much for me because it wasn't just the savageness of the music and the rawness, which was way rawer than, a lot of the British stuff, which did have, really sort of good production. But it was also just the way they looked. You sort of look at this record cover and go, really? And it's like, wait till you hear it. It sort of didn't compute because, we were still like thinking that, there had to be a little bit of spiky hair and torn jumpers and stuff, So seeing these four guys that just looked like normal bums playing music that was off the Richter scale was incredibly powerful for us.
Was there a band or a record that just kind of flicked that switch in you that made you want to play?
I was the Sex Pistols.
Okay.
I mean, even before I discovered, and I saw them on a TV show, which I can't remember where it was, the end of the 70s or right at the beginning of the 80s, but it was an end of decade retrospective. And, and I watched it because I was already a massive music fan. I already had shitloads of records from Ted Nugent and Van Halen and AC/DC, Angels, War of the Worlds, Jeff Lynne, I love music. But I never thought I could do it myself because it almost seemed like, you had to get a degree to be able to do this, to play like, the Who or Small Faces. So when I heard the Sex Pistols play Pretty Vacant, because on the show, went for all the usual stuff. And then it went 1977, punk reared its ugly head. And they played Pretty Vacant. I remember it really distinctively because it was earth shattering and, axis shifting and all that sort of thing. Couple of things in particular, especially Steve Jones, because he had a hanky on his head and he sneered at the camera and all those things. And, and what was coming out of his guitar was like, and I think I rang Ray instantly. And it's like, we're going to form a band. I'm going to play guitar and we're going to be punk. So that really was the start of going, I could do this.
Mm-hmm. Ray, was there a record that was the lightning bolt for you?
No. I was a guy at the high school that me and Blackie went to that had a lot of records. I was buying a lot of records and I was spending all my money on punk and new wave records like my favorite bands were XTC, The Residents, and The Cure. I was buying everything by them. And it wasn't really a band that I liked that prodded me. It was, from memory, Blackie originally asked Kesh to be in a band with him, not me, because they had a band called the Dead Rats, and there were two high school bands. One was called Dead Rats, and the other one was called Straight Jackets. And the Straight Jackets were kind of like an AC/DC Angels kind of a band. They took their name, I think, from Straight Jacket, the Angel song off one of their albums, and I saw them play in the school hall, and I was like, really, it just made me think, oh man, that looked like the most fun. And I remember one day I was walking around the school yard, and there was this bunch of kids milling around this cassette player, and I went to investigate, and there was Blackie and Kesh in the middle of the throng with his cassette player, and I'm listening to this going, what is this? And they all looked at me and said, this is Kesh's band. This is Blackie and Kesh with Brendan. Brendan was another friend of ours. I'm there going, you've got a band? And I was going, oh my God, I really want to do it. And so the bands that really prodded me was the high school bands that were around, because it just sounded like they were having the best amount of fun. I remember Blackie coming around my house with the demo cassette, and he goes, I need a cover for this. You know how to draw? So I drew a rat vomiting with a guitar in his hand. And I go, there's your demo cover. And Kesh wanted me to draw like a drum skin for I think he wanted me to do the drum skin as well, the kick drum. And I was, and I watched them practice and stuff. And that was a period when I saw Kesh, he was playing guitar, and then next thing he'll jump on the drums. And I just saw the band, and I just went, who's doing what here? And I remember Blackie singing a song, and then someone else singing a song. I just went, okay, they're really unfocused, but God, they're having the most fun I've ever seen. And I just really want to be in my band. So I started asking all my other friends, who wants to do what? I want to form a band. So at one stage, I thought I really wanted to be a lead guitarist, because my next door neighbor gave me an acoustic guitar to practice on, and I was learning chords and whatnot. And then in the end, I was like, oh, everyone's playing guitar. I'm going to go and buy a bass. My mum bought me a bass. And and then Blackie comes up and he says, hey, listen, we're going to kick Peter Bransgrove. He was a bass player that they were trialing at the time. I go, how come? And he said, oh, look, he's too much of a hippie. Like, he likes Ted Nugent and Jimi Hendrix and that kind of stuff. But I want to be more punk. And Blackie was going, I think we should be more punk. I'm really interested in, the band being more punk. And I remember thinking, yeah, I'm going to be more suited to them. And so I agreed to join the band. And I was like, it was the best thing that ever happened to my life, because next thing, we're just practicing at Kesh's house. And even back then, I could hear the band getting better, every week, getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and writing our own songs and that kind of stuff. And yeah, so it wasn't any record that made me want to join the band. It was the high school bands that were around the time, and especially Kesh and Blackie's band, the Dead Rats. They made me want to form a band so badly. And as it turned out, there was an opportunity for me to join their band, and we became the Hard-Ons. But there was one record that influenced me more than anything, that playing bass was the right thing to do. And it was a record by the Australian band Exasperations. Nate, have you know that record?
No, I don't. Exasperations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that record was a big, yeah. So that record was a big record for me and Blackie when we were kids, like a really big record. Because we bought that record in 1981 from a record shop called Palings in Bankstown, and it was out for a year, but already it was hard to get. And I remember Blackie saying, if you ever see it, pick it up. And I said, you do the same. And I said, there are 2 copies at Palings. We've got to go and get them. And so we both went and bought them. So we both had the record, so we didn't have to worry about the cassette that we were listening to. And that record changed my whole perception about bass playing, to the point where I just thought, wow, that bass, the bass is actually in a way, it's the linchpin of the band. It's the
Mm-hmm.
That's like the big fulcrum of the band, it just made me see the bass as in a completely different way, how everything was turning on the bass and how powerful that bass was driving the rhythm of the band. And I just loved it. And, the whole idea that one day maybe I could become a lead guitarist or anything like that, it just disappeared out the window after I heard that record.
So when did the name the Hard-Ons hit? Were you playing with Dead Rats for a while, or once you joined, did you do a bit of a reboot?
No, once I joined the band, I think once I joined the band, a lot of really weird things about the band, the Dead Rats, disappeared. So, for example, they had two drummers. They had Brendan and Kesh swapping instruments. So there was no focus in the band at all. But Brendan moved to the Gold Coast, and I joined the band, and they asked Peter Bransgrove, our friend, to vacate the bass seat so that I could join. And I became the bass player, the only bass player. Blackie became the guitar player, the only guitar player, and Kesh became the drummer, and that's all he did. So there was no more swapping of instruments or anything like that. The only thing was, when we first started, Blackie was mostly doing the lead vocals, and Kesh would every now and then do some vocals. But that changed, and Kesh became the main singer. But from Dead Rats, we changed the name to Plebs. Once I joined the band, we became way more focused, and we became the Plebs, Plebs. And that came from a comic book that I used to read called The Wizard of Id.
Oh, yeah.
So that was, So in Wizard of Id, there was a bunch of beggars, poor street people called the Plebs. And so we became the Plebs, the bottom of the barrel, bottom of society, undesirable people kind of thing. It was kind of our way of coming up with a punky name, I suppose. And we played high school dances and birthday parties and that kind of stuff as the Plebs until October 1982. That was so for the whole of 82, because I joined the band at the end of 1981. So right at the beginning of 82, January, that's when we became the Plebs, and then the band changed the name to the Hard-Ons in 1982. I can't remember why, but we became kind of bored with the name Plebs, and we wanted to, I guess we wanted to come up with an even more offensive name.
Okay. So you wanted something provocative.
Yeah, we just wanted something that was punk rock. Or, our 13, 14-year-olds thought that was punk rock.
Well, it certainly gets attention.
Yeah.
Was it difficult, especially in the early days, was it difficult being in a band called the Hard-Ons?
No, not at all. I think we were really lucky. Like, when I turned 18 and we were allowed to start playing in pubs, because you had to be 18 to officially be in a bar. We caught the tail end of the Australian pub rock scene, so there was shitloads of places to play. So I don't know, from day one we just never had troubles getting gigs. And I also have a feeling maybe by then as well, it was 1984, punk rock sort of did reach this really weird little hiccup where it just stopped being fun and became a little bit more, like Oi became popular. So there was a lot of violence at some of these early gigs, and, there was a lot of, uniformed look and things like that. And by the time we played our first gig and, we were already over the looking like punks, because it wasn't just the Saints, because by then, we discovered 60s punk as well. Garage music. And, so we just started playing. We all had long hair, wore board shorts, sometimes even thongs. And I think people like, music's meant to be, shit hot and fun to be around, not, ugly and violent. So, yeah, I don't know. We just never had, that's my take on it anyway. We just never had problems having gigs. And there was tons of pubs that had bands playing in them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
how did you get from there, playing gigs, to Surfing on My Face, the 45?
Just by playing and writing, and then having a guy called Mark Fraser going, you guys should make an EP. And we were like, oh, is it possible? So, yeah, I don't know. There was never any plan with the band. It was almost like just hopping on a freight train and just every part of it was going for it. And recording was exactly the same. We also made friends with a guy called Vince Kuskunas, who played in first the Conspirators and then Psychotic Turnbuckles. Yeah, he was like, you guys should record. There's a pretty good studio not far from you.
He gave us our first ever gig.
Mm.
Yeah, he was a booker at the Vulcan Hotel, and
we used to go there a lot and see the Rifles, and I think Trilobites were already playing. Yeah, just shitloads of bands there, and yeah, we just asked around. It's like, who books this place? We've got a band. I was like, oh yeah, I got a date. Come along and play.
As record fanatics, music fanatics, from very early on, the proposal to be able to make your own record must have seemed like, a dream come true to be able to finally have your music on a record.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Really incredible. It was, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe, but sort of, also acting really arrogant again. Oh yeah, this will be easy. But, them being nervous as fuck, and then, lugging your gear to the studio and going, what do we do? And then having an engineer. I think we were just lucky. Like Vince already recorded with his band a couple of times. So he's like, oh yeah, I know this guy is cool. I don't know, put your drums in there, put the bass over there, and, I'll go stand behind this glass. And, when I say go, play a song.
Yeah, I think just doors kept on opening for us everywhere we went. We were just really lucky that, we got denied gigs at places like the Hopetown Hotel and the Sandringham Hotel. We gave them demos, but they didn't want us to play there because we were too loud or too punk or whatever. I don't think it had that much to do with the name. I think they just didn't like the cut of our jib, to be honest. But we never played at some of those venues that were really popular. But it just didn't seem to matter. We just kept on getting asked to play. And then within, not that long after we started, we were getting pretty big supports. We played with, I remember only after a handful of gigs, we're playing with the Saints, and we played with the Wreckery, and then we played with a Crime in the City Solution in a trade union club. And then a year after, we're playing with the Cramps, at Salinas. And all these gigs were happening. And then just before I think around the time of the Cramps, we also supported Anti-Nowhere League at Salinas. So all these doors kept on opening, even though some seemed to be shut. It just didn't seem to matter. And to be honest, I think there are a lot of purist punks and skinheads and whatnot who didn't like us, but just as many, if not more, that actually, I think they kind of really took to us because we're a little bit different. And I still maintain to this day that the most important thing was that I think we had really good songs, really catchy, good, well-written songs. I mean, for how old we were, I think we had some really good songs that people really liked and that were memorable. And I think that was the thing that opened the doors for us more than anything. Like our songs were really, really good compared to some of the other bands that were better musicians. Our songs, even though we weren't as good as they were as musicians, our songs were so catchy that people just really loved us from the start. And I to this day, I say that the thing that really opened the doors for us was that we had written some really good songs. And I'll tell you that the proof is in the pudding, because our second single that we recorded, Girl in a Sweater, that was our second ever single, that went straight to number one. And to this day, people still call out for it. So I still think it's a really, really good song. And that was...
I just started playing it acoustically.
Yeah, it's our second ever song, and it's still one of our best songs. So, I think that's the thing that separated us from other bands. Our songs, that they were catchy,
Once Nirvana blew up and people started realizing, oh my God, this is actually possible, did Hard-Ons start to get approached by major labels?
We'll be back after these messages. There's no doubt about it. Record collecting has become a serious hobby and even an investment for many around the world. So record collectors have to ask themselves how best to protect their prized records and confidently buy and sell with others. There is an option to consider: vintage media grading at vmgvinyl.com. vmgvinyl.com will professionally grade your record and encase it in protective plastic, so your record will retain its value for decades to come. This is the same approach that comic book and sports card collectors have done for years. Now, I know many record collectors will be horrified with the thought of having their records graded and encased in plastic. And for the majority of records, this isn't necessary. But if you have top dollar records that you need to protect, maybe a super rare album that's languishing on the shelf, a one-off misprint, or a special LP that you want to protect, look up vmgvinyl.com, Vintage Media Grading, and see if this service is right for you. That's Vintage Media Grading, vmgvinyl.com.
Hey everyone, I'm here to talk to you about Seams Easy record sleeve repair strips. Ever find a record in a used bin where the vinyl is gorgeous, but the sleeve has this ugly split and is even falling completely apart? Well, that's okay. Grab it anyway, because with Seams Easy record sleeve repair strips, you can fix that right up. Seams Easy record repair strips repair seam splits from the inside, so it doesn't affect the appearance of a record sleeve, but it does make it functional again. With Seams Easy, records can now slide in and out like new. Turn a $5 record into a $25 functioning collectible. Just ask your local record shop for Seams Easy strips, and if they're not in stock, go to seamseasy.com. That's Seams Easy with 2 Z's. Seams Easy record sleeve repair strips. Seems easy because it is. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
Once Nirvana blew up and people started realizing, oh my God, this is actually possible, did Hard-Ons start to get approached by major labels, people coming around saying like, okay, well, why don't you join us? Did that happen?
That's the funny thing, Nate. We got approached by Virgin Records around the time Girl in the Sweater was just about to come out. We got approached by Virgin Records. In fact, one of the A&R guys rang me when I was living with my mum and dad, and saying that things like, we want to turn you into Australia's Sex Pistols. And I just went, I need to call Blackie about this. And I rang Blackie straight away. I go, hey, listen, Virgin Records want to have a meeting with us and they want to sign us. And Blackie's like, oh, we need to tell Waterfront Records about this. We're just about to put out Girl in the Sweater with them. And we told them and they just lost it. They lost it. But we stay loyal to Waterfront
Lost
Records.
In what way? They were upset? They were...
Oh, they were upset. They thought they didn't want us to leave because we were friends and stuff. So we said, don't worry, we don't want to be on Virgin Records. And then I heard that at one point we were approached by a handful of labels, like Warner Brothers in Germany apparently approached us. But I don't know, because at the time we had Tim as our manager, and Tim was handling all that stuff. But we had more interest in us from major labels before Nirvana got big. And in fact, when Nirvana got big, we didn't really get a look in because we had a history, we had a track record of this is what we do, this is what we do. I think major labels went, okay, they've already been around for 6 years. Let's go for something new that we can make a lot of money on. So I think they didn't want to sign a veteran. And a handful of bands that did get signed were bands like the Butthole Surfers and Melvins. They moved to major labels, but we weren't that lucky in Australia, But I don't know what we would have done, but we did get approached by Epitaph Records just before Smashed by Offspring got blew up. But we said no. I think we went with Twin City Imports in Minneapolis there. And I don't know what our career would have been like if we signed with Epitaph. I don't know, but
so conversations with like Brett Gurewitz directly, or how did?
Brett had approached us to be licensed from Waterfront Records, and I think our management knocked them back because I don't know for whatever reason, but
I think I do remember that. I think we went with. I think by then Waterfront were thinking, oh man, Hard-Ons have been around forever. It's not going to last much longer. Let's just get as much bucks as we can. This could be really mean, me saying this, but I got a feeling Epitaph were like, well, we can't offer that sort of money. We're not that sort of label. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we didn't go with that.
So with the Hard-Ons catalog, do you guys own that? Do you have that? Is that under your control, or are there recordings that you aren't able to reissue?
We've always paid for it, pretty much, except for a couple of records that Waterfront did pay for in the beginning, but they gave it back to us. We pretty much have always been self-sufficient and paid for our own recordings.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you have all the masters, everything, all the publishing, everything belongs to you guys.
I don't know where all that shit is.
Okay. Well, hang on.
Maybe Ray's going to show you where all that shit is.
Cabinet of Ampex tapes.
All those tapes are in my office.
Now, have you guys considered doing self-released? So I think Cash Converters was self-released, right?
Yes, it was.
Now, with the new album, 23 and some of the others, those are with a label, in a partnership with a label, yeah?
That's right.
Okay.
Cheer Squad.
Because we just had the guys from Clutch on who got all their masters back, and then they formed this Weathermaker music, and that's kind of the model that they've moved forward with. Has that been a thought with Hard-Ons to be able to do something like that? Or
there's one problem with that. There's a big problem with that, Nate.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, but you got to understand there is so much to do already in a band. Like, I have to work. I've got to do a day job to pay my rent. And I don't have enough time to do music. Like I got to get going soon because I got to get up at 5 a.m, and I haven't had dinner yet because I've been working all day trying to write lyrics for, a session I'm doing in the studio tomorrow. And to do all that sort of thing is a lot of fucking work. And I know some people can do it, but I personally can't. I wouldn't be able to create the music and do all that sort of thing as well. So to have a label that, we trust in, is a huge relief, and I'd rather do that than try to do it myself because I know I wouldn't do a very good job.
Yeah, I tell you, there's one thing about self-release, Nate, and it's exactly what Blackie says, and it's the amount of time and energy that goes into running a label. And can you imagine the amount of time me or Blackie or one of us in the band will be spending unless we hire someone to do this for us? Getting stuff together, artwork, pre-orders, streaming revenue, all that kind of stuff. It would be an insane amount of work. Now, Clutch are probably in a position where they can actually hire somebody to sit in an office and do all this stuff for them. But I've got to tell you, we aren't in that position. And to be honest, if we go with a label, in this case, in Australia, we're with Cheer Squad, and internationally we're with Golden Robot, we'd rather see if we can go with a couple of labels that would actually get us more popularity. I think if we go with a label, maybe they can actually get out to places where me and Blackie can't even think of. So we have to live with hope that being with a label that we like is going to actually get us to more people than if we'd done it ourselves. And I've got to tell you, Wally, who runs Cheer Squad Records, is a friend, and I'm happy to keep him gainfully employed because I feel good that our records are selling well for him because it means he can pay the rent. So I'm happy that we can.
I can pay the rent.
Sorry, yeah, I'm happy that we can share that with him, because we trust him.
We are a very, very self-sufficient band. But you can only do so much before the sheer amount of time, like it gets snowed under.
I just see you guys just have this huge catalog, this really rich and I think important catalog. What's going to happen with it moving forward? Any thoughts about what happens to Hard-Ons catalog?
Nate, I'll be really honest with you. There's a problem with releasing a lot of old back catalog, and it's that me and Blackie don't always see eye to eye with Kesh, a former member. So I think if he's being a pain in the ass to deal with, then we'd rather just not do it. You know what I mean?
No, fair enough. Okay, so there's that complexity as well.
Yeah, because he played on them, and if he's saying, "Oh, I don't know if I want to get, have that reissued or whatever," it's like, it's too hard to deal with. I just can't be bothered.
Well, fair enough. So you've got the new album, Ripper 23. Now, I've noticed on the last two albums, Ripper 23 and
I'm sorry, sir, that risk been taken.
I'm sorry, sir. Yes. The artwork has gone from illustrative, which I think was mostly done by you, Ray, to more pictures, more realism. Was there any sort of discussion around that, or what was the decision on that? It just seems like a very different approach to cover art than we've seen from the band.
I'm of the belief that the Hard-Ons have done so much stuff, and I tell you, we did this record called "Peel Me Like an Egg," and then before that we did one called "Alfalfa Males," and I looked at those record covers, and on their own, I really loved what I did. I was really proud of them, but when I put all the record covers together and stuff, and I had to say to myself, I think it's really good to be fresh, because if we have to justify the band's existence, and we don't want to be doing stuff like going and playing nothing but our old songs in front of our old fans, which a lot of people would like, we have to move on and do different things. And as some people, there was this review that we got when Tim Rogers joined the band. We played a show in Adelaide, and the review was pretty good. And he actually said the Hard-Ons have now crossed the Rubicon, and I really liked that, because what he meant was we had crossed the river, and we weren't going back across the river again back to our home, and so we weren't going to be fixated on what we had done. And I think moving on was really good. So for me, it was really symbolic to do something different with a cover as well, and to see how that panned out. And absolutely not one person came up to me and said, "Hey, your last album, I'm sorry, sir. I was really upset that you didn't do a cover, draw a picture on it." Nobody said that to me. No one. Everyone just came up and said, "That's a great album, and you should be happy with your record." And I said, "Thank you." And it's the same with the new album. People have gone, "Wow, your new record cover is striking. Ripper 23, what a great idea, and very funny." And so it's still positive, even though I haven't drawn it, but the reaction has been really positive. And to me, it's really important that we did that, because I think the band's always moving forward, and I think it's the only way the Hard-Ons can survive is to stay fresh, and it not just musically, because Blackie's coming up with these new songs that don't actually quite sound like some of the back catalogue at all. They go to different directions, and they have different approaches, almost even rhythmically sometimes. There's some different approaches there. And I think that's really important, because nobody in the Hard-Ons wants to be in a punk rock Groundhog Day. None of us want to. It's just really depressing and stimulating to be in a band like that, I would think. So
yeah, it's not. We're not that sort of band. I know there are a few bands, I guess from our era, who do get together every now and then and play like a greatest hits thing. But we've always been excited to find out what we could do next. And that's never changed. When that does change, that's when the Hard-Ons won't exist anymore. But, even now, we've got a new record coming out Friday. I'm already looking past that, and that's just the way we work, and that to me is what got me excited in the first place, and what still has me incredibly excited now.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we're lucky, maybe it hasn't always gone well. Some bands, I guess they stick with quite a strict formula, and it's very successful for them in terms of, sales and popularity. I think we're lucky that we've sort of gone the other way. And, but having said that, I still think the Hard-Ons do have a parameter. It's no point being silly. We're not going to go out and do a record of kazoo, music. It's still the fucking Hard-Ons. But I think we've always had a pretty broad parameter. But we're always interested in pushing out even a little bit more with each release. And, I think we've done that. Mm-hmm. So when some people go to me, oh, man, this record's really different than what I'm used to. It's like, well, have you heard the last 5? Well, I haven't heard anything since Girl in a Sweater, but it's really different than that. It's like, yeah, no worries.
Yeah. The band that I think reminds me most of Hard-Ons or seems to have a very similar ethos is Melvins.
They're friends of ours, and I know they think a lot of ways the same. We sort of cackle at some of the stuff around us, and we're just ferocious music fans. And part of being a ferocious music fan is like when people go to me, oh man, what don't you like what you used to like when you were a kid? It's like, fucking hope I do. I'll never tire of the Saints and the Damned and X Aspirations, all those amazing things. But now 40 years later, I also like this and I also like that and I also like this and that. So obviously that's going to creep in with what we want to do as well. It's unavoidable if you're hungry and if you want to continue doing what you do in an artistic fashion. And people saying, fuck art, let's dance, all that sort of thing. It's like, no, not fuck art. You can do art and dance at the same time. I think looking at it that way is, for me, that's the way I see it anyway. Like, I love it. I want to be excited and I want to continue to be excited. And this is what we do for us to stay, so fucking in love with this.
There's a handful of heavy bands that play really different music all the time, and they change. And I think Boris are like that too. They tend to mix things around. But your parallel with Melvins is, I think, really good. I thought you might bring them up.
One thing about Melvins also is some of their members shift sometimes. So that vocal spot with Tim right now, he's done 2 albums. Is that his space now? Do you think that there's going to be even more evolution with the band?
I certainly hope so.
Oh, I think there's more evolution to come for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, we told Tim he can stay in the band as long as he wants, but if he's fully committed to so many projects for the foreseeable future, then me, Blackie and Murray will, continue to make music in whatever configuration. But it's not a bad thing because the door's open for Tim to come back anytime he wants, but we don't know what's happening. And, a band like the Hard-Ons, the only thing we can do is turn that uncertainty to our own advantage. It's the only thing we can do, which is like go, okay, maybe Tim's going to be fully booked doing some other stuff until December. What do we do? Well, we'll just go in the studio and start recording without him and coming up with new ideas and new adventures, and then see what happens then, So, so the band can't stay idle because that's when the band dies. Because at our age, we don't want to stop because that's not how this band works. But
is that part of the reason why Nunchuck a Superfly exists? It gives you guys that other project, that other way to be able to exert creativity without relying on others?
Yeah. Nunchuck a Superfly was more of an almost... Look, that started when the Hard-Ons broke up the first time. And it was unreal. It was just as exciting when the Hard-Ons started because it was, approaching music in a different way and having... it did start feeling like, the answer could take forever for me to explain, but the Hard-Ons did get to a point where people started expecting us to be a certain way. And as you can sort of tell by the way we yak on, we're not really interested in that. So we're like, well, okay, well, let's just give it a rest then, because, I don't want to be the way people expect me to be. I want to do what I want to fucking do. And then Nunchucker was born out of that. Now, many moons later, you know, loving being in Nunchucker, but still occasionally coming up with, you know, songs that sounded very Hard-Ons-y because it just happens. It didn't seem like a stretch to give that a go again, but not discontinue with Nunchucker. So it was sort of almost like a happy accident, and like having a couple of bands that, oh, far out, I really dig doing both of this. You know, they're both different enough and exciting enough. And yeah, so to answer your question, like, yeah, yes, you know, it is. And, you know, then also, yeah, doing the solo thing as well. Like, you know, I want to be greedy. I'm getting older. I'm not going to be around for much longer. I even want to do even more.
Yeah, look, you know, when gigs are shrinking up for bands like the Hard-Ons, I mean, we used to play like 3 or 4 times a week, and you can't do that. I remember talking to my friend Robbie, who's a drummer. He said, mate, if you want to play all the time, then you got to be in more than one band. You got to be in like 3, 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 bands. And he told me that at one stage he was in 22 bands, you know. And before I got married and had kids, I was in 5 bands. I was in Nunchucker, Superfly, Wog, Testicle Candy, Toulouse, and the Hard-Ons, and I was doing all this different stuff. And I tell you, it makes you a better musician because you get to play with other people and other drummers and things like that, and they give you all sorts of different ideas. It's absolutely inspiring, you know. I'm not at a position now in my life where I need to, you know, pay attention to my kids and whatnot. But yeah, I do miss that aspect of my life. But yeah, it's playing in Nunchucker Superfly with a different type of a drummer and all that kinds of stuff. It's absolutely awe-inspiring. And when the Hard-Ons broke up and we started playing with Peter Allen, the original drummer in Nunchucker Superfly, a whole new world opened up, because all of a sudden, you know, the rhythm is presented in a different way, and not just because it was a different drummer, because we're writing different songs. All of a sudden, you're like, wow! It was like waking up. You know, it was like literally like a new world opening up. And I remember we one of our earliest gigs with Nunchucker Superfly, we supported Henry Rollins' band. And I remember talking to the guys in Rollins' band, and I said, I'm just about to turn 30. And they all laughed at me, and they said, you don't become a good musician until you turn 30. You've just been at band practice all the while until now. The real adventure starts musically once you hit 30, you know. It was a different way of looking at it. And in a way, they were right.
Well, look, guys, I know it's getting late. Blackie, I know you have to get up early. And
I certainly do.
I could have these conversations for a long time. I hope you guys come back to the show at some point.
Yeah, man, I'll come back anytime. You know, yeah, I could talk forever with you as well. It's a pleasure. You know,
good. I'm glad.
Fellow music lover, and yeah, you fully get what the band and, you know, people, you know, the sort of stuff that we do. You know, fully get it.
Well, I'm obviously, you know, I'm not a native Australian, and when I got here in 2001, and I had a lot of catching up to do, and that's not only Hard-Ons, but Radio Birdman and all these other bands that were around that I wasn't exposed to in California so much. And I think some of the funnest music I've caught up on is Hard-Ons and you know, the Waterfront releases and everything. So yeah, I'd love to do another deep dive into those with you at some point.
Anytime.
And I really like how you guys you tend to give this nod to things that are uniquely Australian. And for example, the cover of Ripper 23, you know, I'm not sure how many people beyond the Australian borders are going to get that joke. But it really is
it's striking anyway, whether you get the joke or not.
It's a great cover no matter what, but also the Doublethink record, you know, you know, again, just kind of that Australian label that I think that was you guys had the first release on Doublethink in like over a decade.
Yeah, and you know, the guy who started that label, he's just about to put out a book. And I think the book is being published by Doublethink. I just saw that this morning. I don't know enough about it yet, but I looked and went, I got to get this. I got to fucking get this.
Oh, the cover for that Double Think single that we did was done by Bruce Warner, the singer from Thought Criminals, who did the original Thought Criminals record. So it looks like a Double Think record, you know. So it was kind of like what would you call it, Blackie? A loving tribute, right?
Oh, very
really
much
was.
so.
Yeah, it was a loving tribute.
You know what was exciting when we got in touch with them and said, "Hey, look, we want to do this," and they went, "We would be honored." And they even said, "Okay, this is what the catalog number is because this was our last release." And we're like, "Holy fuck, this is actually legit. We're legit on Double Think." So, yeah, you know, those sort of things, you know, I could take to the grave. You know, they're for me, they're very important things because, you know, one of the first one of the first songs we tried to cover, you know, was a Thought Criminal song when we started jamming. You know, when you first start playing in a band, you know, you learn how songs work by covering songs, you know, before you can start to write your own shit. And yeah, they were up there with one of the first bands that we ever tried to cover.
But the thing, we also put out in 2003, we put out a single called Pimple Boy, and that was on Fatal Records, which was the same label as the Saints' Stranded. The only thing is we didn't tell them that that's what we were doing.
It's interesting because I just had Ed Cooper on the show, and he went through the whole story of Fatal.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to let you guys go. Ripper 23, it's already out there. If people go to, I think it's cheersquad.com, .au. Hard-Ons merch is at citadelmailorder.com. Folks that are overseas, people in the US, Canada, where can they pick up a copy of Ripper 23 on vinyl?
They can pre-order on Golden Robot Records, and it's being distributed by a distributor called The Orchard. But all they have to do is Google Golden Robot Records, and then you'll get all the pre-orders up there.
Excellent. And they'll be able to get streaming. They'll be able to get on streaming, so they'll be able to hear it right away.
That's right.
While they're
Streaming and downloads.
Perfect. All right. Ray, also, you've got a special indie blue version of Ripper 23 that's only available at Utopia. Is that right?
No, that's not true. Just indie stores like Red Eye, Utopia, and whatnot. But what we do have, we've got 90 green smoke vinyl only at Citadel mail order. So there's only 90 of them printed, and you have to buy them from Citadel mail order. That's mail order only release. And there are only 90 of them. And last time we did this on green vinyl for Citadel Records for I'm Sorry Sir, they sold in a day. So make sure you get your hands on one of those because there's only 90 of them, and it'll be through Citadel Records.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, citadelmailorder.com. In fact, there's other Hard-Ons material there, including the Double Think single and some Nunchuck of Superfly. So anyway, guys, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
We will be bumping into one another soon at some gig, but thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks,
Absolute
Nate.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Nate.
We'll see you around. Get some
See
sleep,
ya.
Blackie. Bye.
Thank you.
man.
Bye.
Oh, man, I've always wanted to have those guys on the show, and I need to tee up a part 2 here pretty soon. Oh, don't forget, there is an extended version of this episode only available for show patrons at patreon.com/vinyl guide. It's like another 15 minutes or so, and I can just hear those guys tell stories and talk about the Sydney music and record scene for days. So patreon.com/vinyl guide. Head up there now. And don't forget to order that limited vinyl copy if there is one available. 90 smoke green ones available at citadelmailorder.com. And everywhere else, Cheer Squad Records, tapes.bandcamp.com, or Golden Robot Records. That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share these episodes on your social media. Share them on Facebook, tweet them out on Twitter, drop them in some Reddit forums or some Facebook groups, various music and vinyl record communities. Actually, even bring it up to your local record shop owner. That's always fun. Show some of your record nerd friends how to get a podcast on that smartphone of theirs. They'll appreciate it, and so will we. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate@thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram @vinylguide. Until next time, keep spinning.